that trip was an eye-opener. You have to remember, I was only 7 years old when I went to Japan, and I was in Japan for 12 years, during the war, after the war. I knew nothing of America, knew nothing of Canada. I didn't know the Japanese Canadians were sent to the camps, and I didn't know the Japanese Americans were sent to the camps. I didn't know anything about the 442 in the United States or what happened in Canada. I had no knowledge. But when I came back, I was 18, 19. So I simply had to see the country, see America. I want to see Canada. So it was an eye-opener more than anything. Some of the things that impressed me, that I remember, I think it was in New Orleans or Shreveport, Louisiana, in the South. I got at the Greyhound bus station. You know, it says to go to the washroom. It says white and I don't think it said black. It's colored. Anyway, and I'm looking at this and I have no idea what this means. And there's an attendant standing there. So I went, attendant, which one do I go in? You know, and he looked at me. And he looked at me, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, you can go in the white. You're okay." And so I went in the white. But it was some time after that I realized what was happening. I didn't know that the black people couldn't go on the bus together. They had to sit in the back part of the bus. You know, there's a saying often used in the States, even today, if you don't behave, you know, go to the back of the bus. You know, that's a very derogative expression, because all the black people had to go to the back of the bus. You know, so you know, anytime even when you're kidding, some people say, "Oh, you go back to the bus." You know, you're a bad boy, kind of. So that's. But I didn't know all those things. You know, and that was, I guess, my initiation, you know, to realize that there's two different worlds in the United States. Everybody's certainly not the same. And, you know, until then, I had no idea that there were that many black people in you know, if you go to Louisiana, you know, I don't know, maybe more than half are black people. After my trip to the United States, Marian Anderson, who was already a very well-known singer, a good singer, she came to Vancouver, and the only auditorium they had was the Georgia Auditorium then, at Georgia and Denman. And yeah, I knew her name, and I went to hear her. But I was shocked because she could not stay at Hotel Vancouver. They would not accept a black person. And that is in Canada. So that trip was, to me, not so much just excitement, but it was an education. It was an eye-opener. It was to know, you know, in Canada and the United States, not everybody's equal. You know, when I worked in the sawmill, there were many native workers there, and I learned that they were not treated the same, you know. So in the trip to the United States, and I think traveling by bus and by train, it gives that chance, opportunity to learn those things. So from that point, I think that trip was very good for me. I was able to, through my brother in Vancouver, I got a job working in a sawmill. And this is what I wanted. I thought, you know, if eventually I'm going to become a forest engineer, I should work in the sawmill. I should work in a logging camp. And this sawmill was in a place called Green Lake. And right now, the area is very famous as it's known as Whistler. But Green Lake was, if you go to Whistler, there's Alta Lake and then there's Green Lake. There's two lakes. And in those days, the sawmill only operated from spring to the first snowfall in December. When I started to work in the logging camp, I was accepted at UBC, which would start in the second week in September. So I would ask to be laid off the first week at Labor Day, and when I was working in the logging camp, so I would be laid off. If I got laid off, you could collect unemployment insurance. So I would be laid off the first week of September. I would register at UBC, and I was able to collect unemployment insurance for 3 months. $24 every Monday morning. I would report to the unemployment office it was on Beatty Street near BC Place now. Anyhow, we had to go to the unemployment office. They would not send you any unemployment checks, so we had to go and get in the lineup. So every Monday morning I would miss the first lecture at UBC. So I would have to ask my friends for the notes. But that was around 1955, 56. And Japan was just beginning to recover from the post-war era, and it was just beginning to manufacture. In fact, what became very well known is the transistor radio in 1954, the Sony transistor radio. And around that time, I don't know who exactly told me, even when I was going to UBC, they said, well, you should get in, because you know Japan, you can speak Japanese, you should get into do trade, you can do big business. And I thought, well, maybe I can, which I couldn't, but I thought I might. So I left the sawmill and logging camp after 4 years, and I had 2 years at UBC. And then I joined a company, a trading company in Vancouver called Y. Uchida and Company. It was a Issei person who had Y. Uchida. He did many things. He did import-export. He also did some insurance. He was a multiple line of business. But one of the things he did was, we also sold air tickets, sort of not really a full travel agent, but sort of a sub-travel agent. And also he was, his company was a ship chandler. And around that time, there are many ships from Japan. They would bring in products of Japan, and then they would go back to Japan with the raw materials, the lumbers from Canada. So there are about 14, 15, maybe 20 Japanese freighters that came into Vancouver Harbor every month. So a ship chandler would provide whatever provisions these freighters needed, anything from food to meat and to also deck material, anything that the ship required. So I was a ship chandler also at Y. Uchida and Company, and I also sold some travel tickets. Not much. There wasn't that much travel, but Kei Iwata was the big travel agent at that time. So I worked for Mr. Uchida. I sold some insurance. I was a ship chandler. I was a bit of a travel agent, and we did some export. He was trying to export Sujiko, salmon roe to Japan, and so it was that era. And I was 4 or 5 years with Y. Uchida and Company. And I guess I spent most of my time as a ship chandler in Y. Uchida and Company, and companies like Mikado Enterprise, which are still there. He was also, his name was Keo Natsuhara. He was also a ship chandler. So we would also compete for the ship chandlery business with all the Japanese freighters that came in.